pessoal, hoje a gente vai fazer um react aqui do canal, um dos meus canais favoritos, tá? É lá da gringa, esses caras aqui, ó. É o Boy, tá? É o Alexa, esse cara aqui, e esse malandro, eu não lembro o nome dele. É o cara do I Did a Thing, ele tem um canal de ciência, é bizarro, tá? Os dois se juntaram e esse canal é um dos meus favoritos. Esse canal é muito bom, esses dois são fenomenais. São dois youtubers que um dia eu gostaria de encontrar, tá? E eles estão falando aqui de um desastre ambiental, vai ter legenda em português aqui embaixo, e eu vou colocar a minha câmera mais pra cima. Talvez eu até diminua a minha câmera um pouquinho, pra poder caber aqui direitinho. E vambora. Vamos lá, é o desastre ambiental que ninguém conhece. Esses caras, mano, sério, vai ver o canal desses caras, eles só fazem umas maluquices muito boas, tá? Então, bora lá, vamos começar.
You might have heard of Chernobyl, or the BP oil spill, or even Exxon Valdez. What if I told you there's an even worse natural catastrophe in the Amazon that no one knows about? The craziest part is it was done on purpose, right? And the company that did this can destroy entire communities whenever it wants. It can like lock up anyone who gets in their way, and best of all, they don't pay tax. Now, we're talking about Chevron, and their headquarters are right behind this wall.
Eu não conheço.
Right? Now, you might think we're here to cause a scene and be really annoying. But there's one thing you should know about us, is that we love power and we love oil. So we're here
A gente chama petróleo não, óleo, eles passaram óleo no corpo.
Do we just go up the looks here?
Tô indo falar com a empresa de... É petrolífera?
Chevron wasn't making this easy. You know, we're just here to get a job, and we quickly realized no one wanted to help us. They just kept sending us back and forth.
Would you ever give them my resume in case they come down?
Actually, they are going to take it. I'm not taking it.
You don't want to take it?
Well, mine, it's a little bit less.
Tá um pouco
It
menos
turns out we might have been in the
oleoso.
wrong building, but security gave us a pass to go upstairs just to be sure. We don't want to miss out on this job.
They're not here.
They're not here.
They're not here. They must have moved out 3 years ago.
So what do we do with them?
I don't know.
There were just a bunch of empty offices where Chevron
Cara,
used to be,
desculpa.
so we
Só o
decided to
fato de
leave
fazer
and
isso
give up on
já
our dreams of
é
working for a big
inacreditável,
oil
mano.
company.
Os caras indo conversar, o cara tempo esperando o elevador.
Our big oily dreams were completely shattered, but out of nowhere, a friendly security guard told us where to go.
Yeah, I know.
Eles saíram do prédio faz uns 3 anos.
Thank you.
Oh, so there is building.
Finding a job isn't easy, you know? Sometimes you make mistakes.
You know what they say, the key to any new job is persistence. So we showed up at the new headquarters.
I just want to get a job with the oil company.
Yeah, we've got our resumes here. As you can see, we're very oily men.
Oily man.
Wait,
on the front.
Olha o segurança já mandando embora os caras.
Security risk.
Oh, it's
Why?
dangerous in there.
No, it's just a security risk. You can't get access to the building.
Okay, even if we're this oily?
Yes.
Okay. We thought you guys love oil, though.
Get a job.
Chamaram a polícia.
Can you guys give our resumes to someone? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
They are a bit oily.
So we can't get a job here? Cool.
So we've had some kind of misunderstanding. Chevron doesn't want to hire us today.
Não
But
quer
also
contratar
we're
hoje.
also not allowed within 100 meters of Chevron or any of its subsidiaries, which is a bit of an overreaction. Look, I'm not an idiot. Like, I know this looks bad. I understand how it looks, but Chevron, if you're listening, I'm not some kind of like creepy, unhinged stalker that's making videos about you on the internet. No, I'm a normal guy. I'm just a regular, well-adjusted person, and I'd also make an asset to your company. We just need to, if you let me explain it from the start, you'll understand. So if we go to the beginning, which is, it actually all started, pretty much around, where to start? It's wide. Aha!
Here, in 1541, when Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana first set sail down the Amazon River in Ecuador looking for El Dorado, the mythical city of gold. Now, spoiler alert, he did not find a city made of gold, but he did find a lot of rocks made of gold, and silver, and iron, and copper, and slaves, and fruit, and coffee, and slaves. All the Europeans had to do was kill 56 million people, and before you know it, everyone got in line. South America became a never-ending conveyor belt, kind of like this belt grinder here. It just keeps going in circles, loading up stuff on this end and emptying it all in Europe on this end.
Exato.
And that's me. I'm Europe in this analogy. Now, the real-life conveyor belt is even better than this because, you know, unlike a belt grinder, it doesn't hurt your face when you use it. It pretty much just gives you free stuff for like...
Essa é a parada que a gente fala da colonização, né? Que o problema do Brasil vem da colonização, Porque nós somos o produto dessa exploração. Que assim, quando a gente fala colonização, parece um termo até bonitinho. Na minha época, por exemplo, colonização era um termo até que assim, foi assim que o Brasil nasceu. Olha que bonito. Parecia até legal, tá ligado? O jeito que era contado quando eu frequentei a escola. Hoje eles fazem um pouquinho, eles explicam um pouquinho mais, que a gente existia já aqui. E aí vieram as pessoas, invadiram, tomaram as riquezas de tudo, a porrada, mataram gente pra caramba, e foi assim que nasceu o Brasil. Não é tão bonitinho. Então, isso aconteceu na América Latina inteira. E quando a gente fala colonização, a gente não fica, a maior parte das pessoas não fica horrorizada, como por exemplo escravidão, mas é basicamente a mesma coisa, de uma forma um pouco diferente, é uma exploração extremamente desumana com um povo. Então, né? Vamos ver aqui.
The next 500 years and counting. Like eventually Chevron will make really good use of this conveyor belt to like suck all the oil out of South America and, you know, make one of the worst environmental catastrophes we've ever seen. But that's for later in the story. For the first couple of centuries, it was primarily used for gold and a couple of other weird things like cigarettes and purple shirts. I don't know, Europeans love that stuff for some reason. But my point is, it's a solid conveyor belt. Even when the South Americans eventually kicked out the Western powers and started ruling themselves, the conveyor belt stayed intact. Over the next 100 years, every now and then they would elect someone who wanted to keep all these profits in South America. But the CIA would just organize a military coup and replace them with a more business-friendly leader, i.e., you know, someone who would make sure Western companies got all the profits. Ecuador is a great example. I mean, look at Jose Maria Velasco Ibarra. I mean, you don't have to look at him. What you need to know is that he got the most votes anyone's ever gotten in Ecuador. He was voted in as president 5 times, but the only problem is he never got to complete a full term in power because...
E é por isso que a gente fala que, por exemplo, o Bolsonaro é entreguista, né? Tinha uma galera que falava isso. E é verdade. Porque se você abre as pernas pros Estados Unidos, é que a gente tem um fetiche aqui, o brasileiro tem um fetiche de ser americano. A gente fica fascinado com o fato dos Estados Unidos ser incrível. Você vê que o monarca fugiu para os Estados Unidos porque, é a terra da... aqui é maravilhoso, o capitalismo funciona, não sei o quê. A gente tem um fetiche. Quando, na verdade, aquele capitalismo só funciona porque durante anos e anos e anos e anos, desde a década de, sei lá, 40, os Estados Unidos vai em outros países e ele basicamente faz uma colonização do século XX, sabe? Então, ele coloca quem ele quiser no poder. Vai contra os meus interesses, eu vou lá e boto a galera sei lá, faço um golpe de Estado. E a CIA tem documentos vazados hoje em dia que mostram que isso é mais do que comprovado, entendeu? Aqui no Brasil, eles fizeram um golpe de Estado, quando na verdade era só um cara falando de reforma agrária. E aí, tipo, nossa senhora, sendo que os próprios Estados Unidos fez reforma agrária. Então, tipo, todo país grande hoje industrializado, precisou fazer reforma agrária para tirar a galera donos de terras que, assim, maior que o Mufasa do Rei Leão. Os caras têm a terra maior que o Mufasa. E aí a gente tem que fazer uma reforma agrária para esse cara não ficar parado ali e ele fazer fábrica, ele realmente desenvolver o país. Mas aqui no Brasil, a nossa elite é meio tantã, tá ligado?
Every time he got voted in, he'd immediately be kicked out by a military coup and replaced with a pro-US
Colocava
leader.
ali,
My man
bota
started getting used to
americano.
it, but the final time he got voted in and then immediately kicked out was extra special, since it coincided with the discovery of huge amounts of oil in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Now, Jose wanted to nationalize the oil and have the profits returned to Ecuador instead of going to giant Western oil companies like Chevron.
Parece a história da Venezuela, não? Parece a história da Venezuela, isso. Eu não tô... Eu não tô aqui pra defender o Maduro nem nada, mas eu sempre falo assim, imagina você ter que votar entre um cara que vai vender o seu país pros Estados Unidos, literalmente, vai pegar o seu país, pegar tudo e vender no preço mais barato possível, basicamente doando os recursos naturais do seu país para aquele país. E um ditador. Um cara punho de ferro, mas que pelo menos é protecionista. Imagina que triste você ter que votar em 2 candidatos e falar, mano do céu, eu tenho que votar nessa situação. Beleza, muitos de vocês vão falar, vota em nulo, mas isso não muda nada. Você tem que escolher alguém pra votar, entendeu? E eu nem tô dizendo que o Maduro ganhou as eleições, mas você já entendeu, tipo, por que alguém vota numa galera meio escrota assim, sabe?
So, obviously the military did a coup and removed him from power. Now, at the time of the coup, all television stations went off the air. 6 million Ecuadorians had no idea that a military takeover was happening, but somehow an American company called Texaco knew exactly what was going on, and funnily enough, the military government's first order of business was to grant Texaco full rights to Ecuador's oil, which is a crazy coincidence. But what's even more of a coincidence is that every time a new leader took the reins of this newly formed Ecuadorian military dictatorship, he'd have to assure Washington that he had no plans to nationalize the oil industry if he wanted to stay in power.
Caraca, maluco, olha o que os Estados Unidos faz. Pra você ser eleito, e é por isso que eu falo que a gente só vai mudar realmente alguma coisa no nosso país quando a gente entender tudo isso, entender o poder que isso tem e como afeta as nossas vidas e literalmente se libertar disso. A gente precisa começar a pensar coletivamente nessa forma, porque qualquer forma de governo que realmente vá contra a elite brasileira, né, ou a elite lá de fora que investe aqui e tudo mais, nós seremos massacrados, tá? É isso. Então qualquer decisão que vá contra a elite é removido do poder, é impeachment, mano, você vai sofrer retaliação. Então eu não vejo uma mudança pela política só, sabe? Só política não vai mudar. O voto não muda nada, porque o voto já é meio comprado. Os próprios donos do dinheiro, eles compram os candidatos. Se você for olhar, quem ganhou as prefeituras agora na última eleição, e vereadores e tudo mais, é coisa de 80% quem recebeu verba de bilionário, entendeu? Então a galera lá de cima, cheia da grana, compra cargos do governo. E essa galera fica devendo coisas pra ele e vai votar a favor, entendeu?
Now, with Ecuador's pesky democracy out of the way, Texaco went to town on the Amazon, digging up all of Ecuador's resources for free and keeping all the profits for themselves. Now, over time, the very hungry oil company drank up so much free oil and just grew and grew and grew that eventually Texaco merged with Chevron, which made two very big oil companies become one of the biggest companies in the world. But the fun ended in 1992. The Ecuadorians finally managed to nationalize their oil and they drove the oil giant out of the country. But this is where the horror show really started. I mean, the Ecuadorians finally got full control of the oil fields and they got a glimpse of what this company's been doing in the Amazon for the past 20 years. There were always rumors of what was going on deep in the rainforest. You know, while the company was in charge, local tribes occasionally complained that their water tasted different. But the oil company brushed them aside and said, don't worry about the taste of the water, drink it up. We've done you a favor and filled it with special vitamins that are good for you, actually.
Meu Deus! Falava que colocava vitaminas especiais na água da galera que vivia ali. Na verdade, era provavelmente algum problema ruim.
It turns out they did exactly what you'd expect a giant corporation to do in a third world country where they had complete control over the government. They decided to dump 72 billion litres of toxic waste into the pristine rainforest rivers because it was, you know, cheaper than disposing of it properly. They wiped out multiple local communities, they poisoned and scarred their bodies and destroyed all their food and water, causing what experts have called the Amazon Chernobyl.
Meu Deus, velho. E eu nem sabia disso. É isso, tá ligado? A vida humana... É engraçado que eu penso assim, caraca, mano. Antigamente, né, a gente não ligava muito, assim, morria... Tinha 10 filhos, morria um, morreu, não vingou, eles falavam, né? A gente faz pior, velho. A gente mata pessoas como se fossem bichos, entendeu? E é isso, essa galera que tá muito no topo, olha quem tá embaixo não como ser humano, olha como bicho, olha como coisa. Ele olha pra você e se ele pudesse esmagar com o pé dele, ele esmagaria. Só não esmaga porque ele fala assim... Esse aí morre mais fácil que eu não preciso nem olhar pra ele tá morrendo, entendeu? É isso, essa galera não vê você como ser humano. Ele... mano, é isso. Caraca, maluco, isso aí é uma música indígena? Que ele canta, a gente vivia num lugar de águas límpidas, e aí chegou meio que os estrangeiros, e a gente perdeu toda a nossa... É uma música indígena, a gente perdeu todos os nossos pessoas que a gente amava.
So yeah, it turns out their oil company didn't put vitamins in the water, which is very sneaky. But we decided to talk to Donziger about it. He's a lawyer who fought for the people of Ecuador. Chevron actually ended up throwing him in prison, which makes him the only American citizen in history to be locked up by a private corporation. But we'll get into that later. First, we want to talk about what he saw in the Amazon in the 90s. Now, the only problem is he lives all the way over here in New York, so we decided to meet in the middle, in sunny Kiribati. But it turns out Chevron won't let him leave the country, so we decided to meet in sunny LA, at a beautiful, pristine park in the middle of the city that's also somehow home to a bunch of Chevron's oil pumps.
It's such a good shot, just an oil well. It looks like it's drilling into your head.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's really funny.
I guess we'll start from the beginning. What did you find in the Amazon? What happened down there?
It's sort of hard to describe how bad it is in Ecuador. Like what they did is just apocalyptic. And I remember seeing a lot of bad shit. But I remember going over like a hill in the car we were in. In the distance, I saw what looked like a lake. It was sunny and it was like glistening in the sun. And as we got closer, he's like, "That's not a lake." I'm like, "Well, what is it?" He goes, "That's an oil spill."
Meu Deus.
It was that large.
But this was the crazy part. We get near the lake, it's hot as hell. You smell the vapors. They're awfully harmful. It's like you can't even hang out there that long, you start getting headaches. And as we got up to the lake, I saw these two indigenous men like wading with no shirts on, no protection, through the lake with like mops. And they were like shoveling the oil into bags. And then like coming out the side, they had oil over them and putting the bags like on the ground.
Meu Deus,
and then going back in the lake and wading and doing the same thing. Like Texaco deliberately created this system. This was not an oil spill. Yeah. This was not an accident.
Eles estavam jogando óleo ali.
Engineered design to dump systematically literally millions of gallons of toxic waste into a pristine, beautiful ecosystem that indigenous peoples relied on for their sustenance, had relied on for thousands of years. In a few short years, they poisoned the whole thing. And since the land can't support them anymore, they're left to take jobs, like pay nothing, virtually nothing, to sit there and do this futile exercise of mopping up an oil lake with your bare damn hands.
While there's a pipe that's still...
Yeah, exactly.
Feeding it in.
Exatamente.
It was at this point that Stephen remembered that he was, in fact,
petróleo.
a lawyer, which means he can represent these indigenous Ecuadorians who had never set foot in a courtroom before.
Ellos van a estar ahí, sentado arriba, con sus trajes, sus corbatas, etc. No tengan miedo. Se levanten, se va al micrófono y hablan.
Now, the initial problem was that this oil company was in control of the Ecuadorian government for decades. So they got the government to sign something called the Act of Liberation, which made it illegal for anyone from Ecuador to sue them, which I didn't know was possible. I mean, on that note, Chevron, if you're watching, by watching this, you legally forfeit your right to sue us. Okay.
Cara, você entende como... por isso que eu acho que a gente não tem como mudar usando o sistema. As coisas têm que mudar realmente de dentro pra fora. E a gente tem que quebrar alguns ovos pra isso acontecer. Porque a própria justiça, ela tá ali pra proteger os interesses da classe dominante. Então, se você não é classe dominante, não tem o que fazer. Não adianta nem a justiça. Se uma empresa... A gente tem aqui no Brasil, claro, o caso da Vale... o caso de diversas outras empresas, se você for procurar o negócio lá do... que eu não lembro o nome da empresa, a Braskem, que fura coisas lá em Maceió e destrói faz o fracking lá, né? E acaba destruindo e afundando as casas. É Braskem? Putz, desculpa, se não for, desculpa, gente, ó. Eu posso estar enganado, eu posso estar um completo idiota e se eu estiver falando a empresa errada... Ok, eu estou certo, é o afundamento da mina da Braskem, é isso mesmo. É lá em Alagoas. Minha memória não tá tão ruim, hein, porra. Vambora.
Glad that's out of the way. So the cards were stacked against the Ecuadorians, but nonetheless, Stephen started their 30-year fight with Chevron. Now, he may have had 54 independent judicial site inspections resulting in 64,000 chemical sampling results showing pollution, but you could say Chevron had a bit of an ace up its sleeves.
Era dona do judiciário.
The ace was $262 billion. So, in order to silence the indigenous Ecuadorians, they hired 60 law firms and 2,000 lawyers, which, in case you didn't know, is this many people.
Caraca, maluco. Oh, sério. Então, é isso que eu falo, que assim, pra você ganhar dinheiro, de verdade, tá? Se você quiser ser muito rico nessa sociedade que a gente vive hoje, você tem que fazer esse tipo de trabalho, onde você não tem escrúpulos. Vou dizer na minha profissão de criador de conteúdo, ofereci... Até hoje, ontem neguei outro. O negócio de bet, cassino online, tigrinho, aquele da Blaze, me ofereceram montanhas de dinheiro. Era só eu ter aceitado tudo. E eu estaria, ó, de boa. A diferença é que eu não ligo pro dinheiro. Não é que eu não ligo, eu queria ter dinheiro sim, tá? Mas não acho que eu não quero ter dinheiro, mas eu gostaria de dormir à noite e falar, o mundo tá ficando melhor pela minha existência. Acho que esse é o meu sonho, tá ligado? Então, é isso. Mas essa galera não tem isso. E assim, eu não culpo também. Vai fazer o quê? Entendeu? Cada um tem seu preço. Tem um amigo meu que falava que todos somos putas. A única coisa que diferencia um dos outros são os preços. Tem gente que o preço não é nem dinheiro, mas vai ter um preço, tá? Você pode ter certeza.
Law firms and 2,000 lawyers, which, in case you didn't know, is this many people, which means Chevron ended up spending over $3 billion in this case.
Maluco.
Now, when a company like Chevron puts 2,000 of the world's most expensive lawyers in the same room, you end up getting bombarded with mountains and mountains of useless paperwork. Each page is specifically designed to clog up whatever court has to read them. Every single page needs an answer, and it costs your legal team thousands of dollars to answer them. Their aim is to simply outspend you until you have no choice but to drop the case. Now, Stephen wasn't only running out of money. The 30,000 Ecuadorians that he was representing were all dying of toxic contamination. So, if they stalled for long enough, Stephen wouldn't have any clients left. Now, Stephen's team was trying to sue them in front of a jury in the US, and Chevron sure as hell didn't want that. So after 10 years of stalling, Chevron eventually won and got to choose to do the prosecution back in Ecuador, a tiny country with no real power to enforce any rulings. And then the next 8-year battle began. Now, Chevron didn't just stall and outspend Stephen, they got even sneakier. They went so far as to set up fake laboratories. They would pose as independent labs who studied soil samples and coincidentally concluded that there was actually no pollution in the Amazon. But it turns out they belonged to Chevron, and thanks to a group of brave whistleblowers, the truth got out. Now,
e é isso. Mais gente sem escrúpulo. E você entende como a gente fica todo mundo refém dessa coisa chamada dinheiro? A gente faz coisas absurdas por isso? Porque essa é a única forma de você ter valor na sociedade. Quando as pessoas começarem a entender que o valor tá dentro delas, que o valor não é o valor do dinheiro, que, aliás, nem o que você faz da sua vida tem valor. Isso aqui é um nada. Sem zoeira, se amanhã o sol explodir, civilizações do futuro não vão nem saber que a gente existia. Se amanhã o sol explodir, ninguém vai saber da gente. É esse o nível de insignificância que tem isso aqui. Mas a sua vida vale alguma coisa, tá? Nada importa, mas você tem o seu valor. E isso é importante você saber, tá? O dia que todo mundo souber o próprio valor, o dinheiro vai ser só mais uma coisa. É um treco, tá ligado? E é por isso que a gente tem que ter dignidade. A gente tem que lutar para as pessoas terem dignidade, porque sem dignidade, se você passou a sua vida inteira sofrendo por falta de dinheiro, sem dignidade nenhuma, quando você fica mais velho, dinheiro igual a dignidade na sua cabeça. Então, ter dinheiro é importante. Então, quando você ganha dinheiro, você vai atrás de mais dinheiro, porque você precisa ter mais dignidade, e mais dinheiro, e mais dinheiro. E aquela fome que você tem, ela não pode voltar nunca mais. E aí, não pode ter pro seu filho, não pode passar pra mais ninguém que você ama. Então, você vai sempre querer ter mais, e mais, e mais, e mais. E é esse o ponto. A gente quer mais pra saciar aquela fome nossa, sabe?
We've covered Australian whistleblowers a lot on our channel, and a lot of our friends have been sued and imprisoned for doing the right thing. But these guys are on a whole new level. Like, when you get in the way of Chevron in a third world country, you usually get tortured and murdered. Like one of the main indigenous representatives for this Chevron case, Pablo Fajardo, he was receiving death threats as soon as he joined the legal team, and as a warning, his brother was tortured and killed, and the government refused to investigate it.
Ese lugar donde está sepultado mi hermano.
Isso aí vale
mi hermano
filme,
murió 8 días antes de que realicemos la primera inspección judicial del caso Texaco. Le habían torturado fuertemente, cortado su rostro, no tenía nada en la cabeza, no se le conocía, no se le identificaba. Alguna vez un informe militar le dijeron a uno de mis hermanos que el que buscaban era a mí.
But in the face of all this brutality and corruption, the people of Ecuador just kept fighting and they won. Like, it's insane. Chevron was ordered to pay $9.5 billion to the people of Ecuador. Like, David beat Goliath. This had never happened before. It was a landmark ruling, like one of the biggest cases in world history. And somehow the indigenous Ecuadorians beat one of the world's biggest corporations. But it was time for the next ace up Chevron's sleeve.
Dinheiro.
Also money. It was also money.
Dinheiro.
They lobbied the US government to sanction Ecuador. They pulled all of their assets out of the country before the court could seize them, knowing that they were so rich and powerful that no other country would dare enforce Ecuador's ruling.
The top lawyer famously said in 2009 that we will never pay a penny of this judgment. We will fight this until hell freezes over, and then we will fight it out on the ice.
I mean, look, considering that they're polluting the planet, maybe, hell will freeze over pretty soon.
Yeah, that might come sooner than we think.
So now, after 18 years of fighting, Stephen's team has to chase Chevron around the world, trying to find a country that would enforce this judgment and finally make Chevron pay for purposely destroying these people's lives. In the meantime, the Amazon still looks like this. This giant Western company drenched it in toxic waste, and the few bits of the Amazon that are still pristine are now reserved for rich Westerners who just shit and vomit all over the rainforest floor while trying to find themselves on an ayahuasca trip.
Caraca, velho, é a viagem da ayahuasca. Que doideira, mano. Só ficou aquele pedacinho bonitinho pra turista rico ir lá ficar tentando se achar.
But if you think that's bad, things are about to get much, much worse for the Ecuadorians.
Meu Deus, vai ficar pior.
Chevron knew full well that if they ended up paying this judgment, they'd set a precedent, right? Their whole business model, like the way they make insane profits is by just like going into a country, sucking up all their resources for as cheap as possible, and then just dumping the waste wherever they want. And then they leave the local communities to pay the price, right? If Chevron pays $9.5 billion to the Ecuadorians, soon every single community they've destroyed around the world will start asking for money. So they decided to make an example out of Stephen to, scare other lawyers from doing what he's done. So they took him to court in the US and claimed that he had bribed an Ecuadorian judge personally to rule against Chevron. And to prove that, they got this guy called Alberto to kind of stand up in front of the court and just, say that that's what Stephen did. Now, here's the catch. Alberto said that during Stephen's case, and then 3 years later, he admitted under oath to an international tribunal that Chevron paid him more than $1 million to lie about Stephen, which is insane. But the crazy part isn't the $1 million lie. It's the fact that it took 50 days to coach this man on how to present fake testimony, which, I know there are so many wild parts of this case, but 50 days. Like paying the world's most expensive lawyers for 50 days just to teach this guy how to recite a lie. I mean, is he an idiot?
O cara recebeu $1 milhão e levou 50 dias, mano. Como pode?
Like, how does it take him 50 days to learn how to lie? Like, I swear it should take a day. Like, in fact, I've hired an Ecuadorian man to prove how easy it is. And to replicate the stress of the courtroom, I've also taken his clothes off.
Esteban gave me lots of money. He is very, very bad man. Also, Chevron is very good company.
Brillante, Diego. Eres muy talentoso. No jodas, solo 15 minutos. Diego, ven. Eres muy talentoso. Bravo, Diego. Bravo.
But anyway, Alberto told his $1 million lie and tricked a jury into ruling against Stephen. Well, actually, no, it wasn't a jury. It was...
Mano, eu tô lendo a legenda às vezes e a legenda tá muito cagada. Desculpa, gente. Mas o vídeo lançou há pouco tempo. O YouTube tá tendo que fazer isso a toque de caixa, eu acho. Mas assim, saiu um negócio aqui agora que é quer ver, ó? Essa parte aqui.
$1 million lie and trick...
É mentira de 1 milhão de bonecas. Não, é que ele confundiu com a $1 million de doll. E é isso. Doll lies, entendeu? Não, é $1 milhão, tá?
Jury into ruling
enganou o
against
júri pra decidir se contra
Actually, no, it wasn't a jury. It was all decided by this one guy, Judge Louis A. Kaplan, who's coincidentally funded by Chevron, but that's for later in the story.
Ele é financiado pela Chevron. Meu Deus, tem mais história.
Now Alberto is kicking back in California, receiving a lifetime salary from Chevron, and Stephen found himself in a whole lot of legal trouble. He got his law license revoked. Like, they froze his bank accounts and they took his apartment. Like, they literally took the clothes off his back. And probably like the pants off his legs. Also maybe his underpants off his penis or something. And so Chevron, but Chevron wasn't done. So they got old mate Judge Louis A. Kaplan to take another crack at him. And just on a side note, why does he look like that? Like, why does every single ghoul who sells their soul to a big corporation end up looking like this? What's going on?
Sabe por que eles se parecem assim? Que, sei lá, ele matou aquele sonhador dentro dele há muito tempo. E quando a gente perde sonho e tudo mais, fica desse jeito aí, ó. A gente fica desse jeito. Sei lá.
I don't understand. Is this what happens when you make a deal with the devil?
Talvez sim. Você faz um acordo com o demônio, você fica assim.
Judge A. Kaplan, Big Lewis, he wants to confiscate Stephen's laptop and phone. Which Stephen obviously...
Você nunca vai ver um hippie, um cara todo riponga e tal, aceitando, sei lá, coisas assim, negócios ilícitos de 1 milhão, 2 milhões de dólares, entendeu? Você nunca vai ver esses caras. Porque esses caras, eles têm um pouco mais de realmente propósito do que essa galera que se vende por qualquer grana.
Appealed because of, lawyer-client confidentiality, but also ethically. The last thing you want is to give Chevron a list of every single Ecuadorian who stood up to them and exactly what they said. So while Stephen was appealing it, the judge went to the US government and said, look, this guy's disobeying court orders. You need to prosecute him for contempt of court. And the US government, to their credit, were like, no way. Like, we're not getting our hands dirty with Chevron's corrupt case. Just leave us out of it, right? And, in most countries, this would be the end of the story, right? If the government doesn't want to prosecute you, then you're free. But this wasn't a normal country. The judge actually managed to run a private criminal prosecution for the first time in US history. This is where a private company can take over the government's job and decide who goes to jail themselves.
Meu Deus!
So essentially, if you're rich enough to pay for a courtroom, for all intents and purposes, you're the government now. And you don't even need to have a jury. The judge you hire gets to decide. Now, it's bad enough to have a private company sending someone to jail. But what's worse is that everyone who's meant to be independent is actually on Chevron's payroll. The original judge who decided this was a Chevron investor, and the law firm he had handpicked for the private prosecution, Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, was paid $3 million from Chevron just before they started prosecuting Stephen. And there's even more law firms linked to this. Like, it's insane how these law firms are so good at breaking the law. Like, I think it's just like when you have a business that is just a bunch of last names in a row, people take you more seriously. Like, it's easier to get away with stuff. I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot of info out there on like exactly how Chevron funded these companies, but if you think that's exciting, then you're a nerd. Most people don't want to hear about that.
Eu gosto de saber essas coisas, velho. Eu sou nerd mesmo. Eu gosto de, entender como é que essa empresa comprou tanta gente assim, mano. É bizarro. Isso tudo pra não pagar. Não é só pra isso, né? 9 bilhões de dólares. Mas é porque ele ia perder mais pra frente de outros lugares. Ia começar uma enxurrada de coisas. Então ele não vai querer pagar nunca.
But if you're interested, it's all in the video description. But in short, the government gave prosecutorial power to a private company, Chevron, which now can decide who they want to put in jail.
Que é isso?
And they can use that against Stephen. And while they're deciding on this, Stephen's, locked in his house with no money.
He put an ankle bracelet on me, and I couldn't leave my apartment. Couldn't go to dinner, couldn't hang with my son, couldn't go to games. And I remember a good friend of mine came over. I was like,
não, cara, isso é Estados Unidos, velho. Não é a terra da liberdade? Que é isso, velho?
I'd been on house arrest for a month. She's like, when you reach 100 days, we should do like a press release. She tells me this. I'm thinking to myself, are you fucking crazy? This isn't going to last 100 days. 100 days came. She was right. She knew something. 200 days came.
Being under house arrest for, 1,000 days? How long were you?
993 days. So
Meu Deus, ele ficou 3 anos preso.
That's lenient. That's
em casa, por conta de uma empresa privada.
Now look, I'm not a lawyer, but I have done a lot of crimes. And to me, this sounds like a crime, right? Like locking someone up for 993 days, without being convicted of anything, sounds like kidnapping. But it gets worse.
Exatamente, é sequestro. A empresa sequestrou ele.
Okay.
Processaram ele por 60 bilhões de dólares.
The most amount of money of any individual in the history of the United States. And just so people understand a little bit about me, I'm like a normal human rights lawyer. I have very little money.
You don't have $60 billion lying around?
Não tem 60 bilhões aí, pô.
Any bank has been sued for, any oil company's been sued for, and I'm just a lawyer, sitting in my 2-bedroom apartment in New York with my wife and son. I mean, it was the craziest shit.
So after almost 1,000 days under house arrest, Chevron obviously convicted him of contempt of court and sent him to prison, which, is unusual for a misdemeanor. But what's even weirder is that they managed to sentence him for 4 times the maximum sentence.
So prison was crazy. I was scared that, honestly, they would kill me in prison. Because given how irregular everything was and how corrupt the shit that had gone down, I'm like, my God,
mano, é muita corrupção, velho. É muita corrupção, velho. Por dinheiro,
velho. They could arrange for me to die, for a guard to kill me, or they could charge you with another crime, keep me there forever.
Now, unfortunately for Chevron, they didn't manage to kill him in prison. But in fact, the prison was actually more on Steven's side than he expected. Like the prison management was just embarrassed to have this obviously innocent man in a maximum security prison on a misdemeanor.
And it was horrible PR having, constant protests and visits by celebrities and politicians and multiple reports from Amnesty International and the UN. The prison wanted him out of there.
But the prisoners, on the other hand, wanted him to stay.
Several of the inmates gave me a nickname, the counselor.
Ele tava ajudando a galera na prisão.
Want, advice on their cases. My response, I thought, look, you don't want advice from me. I'm a really bad lawyer. You never want to get advice from a lawyer who he himself is in prison. Trust me, you don't want my advice. Well, listen to your story. So people thought that was really funny. So they started to call me the counselor. You could get anything in prison if you had the money. And I eat a lot of vegetables, and the word was the food budget had been running out, so there were no vegetables, no fresh vegetables in the prison. Everything was processed, gross food, not a lot of it. I was losing weight rapidly. So I asked this very well-known inmate who was a mob guy, who was super respected in the prison. I said, do you know where I can get a carrot? I said, all I want is a damn carrot. And he goes, counselor, give me a couple of days. So one day, he starts shuffling down the hall at night, and he goes, here, and he pulled out like the biggest, dirtiest carrot I'd ever seen. It was like he was just lifted out of the ground 5 minutes before, had dirt all over it.
Wasn't in his ass?
I'll tell you what, he's like, here's your carrot. So I washed it, ate a couple bites. I'm like, I'm gonna sort of try to eat this little by little every day for 10 days. It was enormous. It was such a good carrot. So this is the funny part. I finished the carrot. A couple days later, every night at 9 o'clock, you have to stand in front of your cell, and the guards come in, and they literally count one by one with those little things, 1, 2, 3, everyone in the prison. So I'm standing in front of my cell, and I look down at the end of the hall, and the guard who was running the count, I thought I saw a carrot in his hand. And the craziest shit, at the end of the hall, there was this big trash bin. I thought I saw him toss the carrot into the trash bin. So I'm like, when the count ends, I'm gonna go see if I can dig that carrot out. But I'm like, but the other thing about prison is, it's really clean. The inmates keep everything hyper clean, and if you have germs or don't.
Isso é um negócio que eu já conversei com alguém que foi pra prisão. Quer dizer, o irmão dessa pessoa que eu conheço foi pra prisão, ficou acho que 2 anos, uma coisa assim. E ele fala, é uma coisa que a gente pensa errado, né? Não, a prisão é tudo sujo, não sei o quê. E não, velho, os prisioneiros são extremamente limpos. Ninguém vai comer sua bunda. Não tem essa, entendeu? Porque eu pensava assim, mano, eu vou na prisão, vou virar, sei lá, carne da galera ali, né? A galera vai querer comer meu rabo. Loirinha, não sei o quê. A gente vê isso em filme, tá ligado? Só que não, mano, não tem essa parada. Todo mundo ordeiro ali. E, os caras, chefão, fala assim, a gente não é selvagem aqui, tá ligado? A gente tem uma civilização aqui dentro, sabe? A gente é civil aqui dentro. É bem interessante. Então todo mundo limpa, cela limpa. Se tiver cela muito suja, os caras vai lá e te senta a porrada pra você arrumar a sua cela, esse tipo de coisa, entendeu?
Keep clean or take food out of a trash bin, you're not really highly regarded. Yeah, right. So I'm like, okay, I gotta go see if it's a carrot. If it is, pull it out without anyone seeing me, okay? So I walk down, I'm looking, I'm like, that's a fucking carrot. Nice.
Caraca, o cara
it's a big one too.
É uma cenoura.
I'm looking around, I couldn't pull it out. So I went back to my cell, I'm I'll come back in 10 minutes, and everybody goes to bed. Came back in 10 minutes, and goddamn it, trash bin had filled up, and someone had taken it out. So I lost the carrot. But the point is, a normal human being in prison became so desperate for food that I was literally ready to dive into a fucking trash can to get a carrot.
É isso mesmo.
No, I mean, it's the craziest shit. And I thought to myself, what are you becoming?
Meu Deus, o que aconteceu?
Because when you're in that environment, there's a shortage of food, shortage of love, shortage of education, shortage of opportunity. Everyone's abused.
Yeah.
You create the characteristics you need to survive in that environment. And I felt myself changing.
Yeah.
Wow. And I was really happy to get out of there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mano, que zoado, né, velho?
But I bet not in prison.
No.
I mean, listen, nothing against eating carrots out of bins. I'm ready to do it, you know? I went from Harvard Law School with Barack Obama to fucking jumping into a trash bin in a prison to get a carrot. That was really incredible to think about.
So Stephen did his time and finally got to be reunited with his family. He was technically free, but Chevron succeeded in completely destroying his life and made it impossible for him to continue his work with the Ecuadorians.
I mean, I'm not locked up, but think about it. I can't leave the country, I have no passport. I can't work, I have no law license.
Meu Deus,
and I can't transact business, I have no bank account. And I can't work even a non-law job because I owe them money and they could take the money. You know, so, you know, you're looking at like...
Mano, sério.
I don't know how to describe it, I'm like a half citizen.
Eu quero que você pense se essa história toda que ele tá contando aqui, se fosse em qualquer país, se fosse em Cuba, se fosse no Vietnã, se fosse na Coreia do Norte. Esse cara, ele seria... Olha aí o que o sistema faz. Você tá entendendo como tudo é propaganda? Tudo que você pensa que acha que sabe, você na verdade tá sendo manipulado por propaganda. E você precisa começar a pensar um pouco mais com a sua cabeça, em vez de simplesmente repetir o que os outros falam, sabe?
Now, this is all incredibly depressing. I mean, Stephen's life was destroyed because he dared to do the right thing. But here's the good part. You can fix this. Now, in our last whistleblower video, David McBride was about to go to jail and he didn't have money to appeal the sentence. Then we posted our video and had a link to his chuffed crowdfunding page. So you guys raised $90,000 for his legal fund in the first 3 days. Like, I didn't know we could do that. Like, how is that possible? It's insane. He was completely broke and he was facing down like a corrupt government. He was going to go to jail like for ages. And you guys gave him the money to launch an appeal. Like, you did that. Like, it's insane. So we've partnered with Chuff for this video to show the people in power that we can do it again, right? Like, this community has turned YouTube into a weapon for the most disadvantaged people on earth. So click the link in the description and donate whatever you can to Donziger's legal fund. And we can fight back against Chevron and get them to pay for what they did to the people of Ecuador. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but we actually have the power to influence this. Like, we've done it before. Like, if the Ecuadorians win this, we have a viable model to make corporations pay for their crimes around the world.
I just want to say, like,
mais ou menos, velho. Mesmo que ganhe esse. Cada caso é um caso e tem que lutar por meses. E os caras têm time de advogado, todos sem escrúpulos. É complicado, mano.
Even though the communities in Ecuador have not collected the money yet, they are going to collect the money. It's not so much the 10 billion, although they don't want to pay it. It's the model that produced the 10 billion. Yeah. They sort of see this case as potentially opening up the floodgates to a huge amount of global liability because they're guilty of pollution all over the world. Yeah.
Sim,
and they don't
exatamente.
want this to be replicated in other countries.
Porque se você olhar, sei lá, Congo, se você olhar onde tem jazida de diamante, esse tipo de coisa, mano, o que tem de gente fazendo crime de guerra, velho, nesses lugares. Crimes que seriam bizarros em guerra. E não tem a contabilidade, né? Não fecha. Tipo, os caras não são punidos nunca. É a mesma coisa que quando alguém rouba alguma coisa sua, você quer que ele seja punido. Você quer de volta aquilo que roubaram de você. Só que quando alguém faz isso contra o planeta, parece que a gente não se importa tanto, né?
Now look, I know what you're thinking. I don't live in the Amazon. It's just an obviously made-up place full of fake animals. I mean, what's this thing? It looks like bad AI. The whole place is supposedly populated with these obviously fake creatures. But this isn't just an issue for the Amazon. Chevron keeps doing the same shit wherever they can get away with it, like here in LA. Now, if you spend any time in the poorer areas of LA, you'll see oil wells right next to some unfortunate person's house. But in rich areas, they'll legit build fake hollow office buildings and hide all their operations inside there.
Exactly.
Like this. It's a fake building full of oil wells and no one knows about it.
Excuse me. Do you know what's in this building? No, it's got 50 oil wells inside. They're pumping oil, but it's like a fake building. It's really weird.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's like
Ninguém
a fake
sabe,
building,
tá vendo?
and they've just got all these oil wells in.
Eu vi um prédio desse, eu não lembro onde foi, acho que em Nova York, cara. Tem um prédio em Nova York que é louco, é bizarro. Tem um prédio em Nova York que não tem janela, velho. É um prédio muito doido, quer ver? Deixa eu ver se eu acho. É esse prédio aqui, ó, quer ver? 33 Thomas Street. Esse prédio não tem janela, velho. Mano, eu juro, eu queria muito saber o que tem ali dentro. Olha, o lugar onde tinha troca de telefonia, coisas de telefonia da AT&T. Cara, que loucura isso aqui, velho. Eu olhei isso uma vez, eu tava andando lá e eu olhei. Falei, mano, o que é isso aqui, velho? Não tem janela, não tem nada. O que tem aí dentro, mano? Tem, tipo, esses buracos aqui em cima e esses na lateral. É muito doido isso. Tá, vamos lá, vamos ver.
Make it look like a building.
That is crazy. We just walk past and not even have idea.
Pois é.
Like, there are no windows.
It's no windows. It looks like a building, like to your brain, like if you just see it but don't pay attention. Then when you really look, there's no windows, there's no doors.
É, estão pegando petróleo ali dentro, tá vendo?
Really funny. It doesn't say it's an oil well. It just says natural resources, but all it says is no smoking. I wonder what's going on.
Something's going on now because look at you guys.
Yeah, we're
What's
obsessed.
going on?
There's like 50 oil wells in there, but it looks like a normal building. You know, I think the building's just like a shell.
We heard about it. We just want to see it. Do you think most people know what's in there?
These fake buildings are everywhere in Beverly Hills. They even have an oil pump hidden in a high school, which they call the Tower of Hope, which is hilarious. Because, like, what's a Tower of Hope? Like, what is this thing? Like, well, why is it making noises? Why does my head hurt when I stand near it? I mean, people only realized it was an oil pump when it randomly caught fire. Now, while living next to an operational oil well is, catastrophic for your health, the bigger issue is that, just like in the Amazon, the government is so corrupted by oil money that they let Chevron do whatever they want. Once they suck up as much oil as they like, they just disappear and leave these open toxic holes there. Because, it's cheaper than actually closing the well. And these abandoned wells are all over the city. Usually what happens is your family will be breathing this stuff in every day. Your 9-year-old daughter will start getting random nosebleeds.
Cara, olha que loucura isso, velho. Tipo, ele simplesmente deixa o bagulho aberto ali, soltando aqueles cheiros do que sobrou ali dentro, que deve ser uma mixaria, mas tá cheio de gás. Se alguém jogar um negócio, pode explodir. Mano, é bizarro.
Something, and eventually she'll lose the ability to walk. But that's only if you're lucky. If you're
olha isso, cara.
unlucky, toxic sludge will literally burst out of these abandoned wells and destroy your home. And you'll be in the same position as the indigenous Ecuadorians. The companies responsible will never compensate you, and they'll send you to jail themselves without a jury if you try to get your money. Now, Chevron's playbook is the same all over the world. Like, this is a global issue. It affects everyone, right? And we haven't even spoken about climate change and the fact that burning these fossil fuels is like cooking our planet in the long term. We're talking about Chevron fucking our planet in the short term. Like, these companies, they come in, they take all our stuff for free, they don't pay any tax, and they just dump toxic waste wherever they want because our governments are too scared to like enforce any rules. But the good news is that Chevron is scared of us. They're scared of vulnerable communities getting together and getting organized. They're scared of lawyers who represent them, and they're scared of us, the people who support them. So click the link in the description and make Chevron pay.
É a única forma que a gente tem de combater qualquer tipo de abuso, seja nos Estados Unidos, Equador, seja em qualquer lugar, seja na sua própria comunidade, é você se juntando, velho. Você se organizando. É isso.
Also, if you want to help fund more videos like this, please go to the Boy Patreon. You get a full video every month and access to the Discord community where you can chat with the boys and have a say in their future videos.
Cara, eu adoro esse canal, mano. Eu adoro esse canal, sério. Esse canal aqui, se você olhar os vídeos dele, dá uma olhada aqui, vê que legal. Olha, esse aqui eu não vi. Ah, eu vi sim. Eu vi em outro, em um outro canal. Esse maluco aqui, ó. Nosso amigo foi pra cadeia. Ele mostrando que a mesma injustiça que ia acontecer, que o cara que denunciou crimes de guerra na Austrália acabou sendo preso por denunciar crimes de guerra que o próprio exército australiano fez em nome dos Estados Unidos. Mano, eles faziam uns react que eu queria muito fazer uns react assim com alguém, sabe? Eu acho muito legal o jeito que eles fazem react. Eu gosto muito desse canal. E eles foram os caras que fizeram o vídeo, mano, e já faz muito tempo, mano. Eles fizeram o segundo vídeo do canal deles, ó. Eles foram até a Coreia do Norte pra conseguir um corte de cabelo. Esse vídeo é muito bom. É fenomenal, cara. Mas é isso aí, espero que vocês tenham gostado desse vídeo aqui. Eu vou almoçar agora, espero que você seja feliz, tá? Não acredite em qualquer coisa que você escuta por aí. E a gente se vê na próxima. Um beijo, fui!